Hello everyone, I am Dr. Vijayananda Purkar, Vice Principal and Head, Department of English, Sri Shivaji College, Parbhani. Today I am going to discuss about Plato, the Greek master Plato. First, let us take a look at Plato's age. We are uncertain about the birth year of Plato. It is generally put down to 427 BC, but the death certainly was in 348 BC. The glory of Athenian art and literature was on its peak, but coming to Plato's age, it started going down. Philosophy and oratory were replacing this art and literature. The philosophers saw that the national character was on the decline and even the standards of social and public life were deteriorating. So, the philosophers started discussing a great variety of matters of concern to the citizen and the state. These were their major concern, the citizen and the state. For all the matters of discussion, they applied the test of reason. In all these discussions, Socrates was the head of all these philosophers. This was because of his dispassionate quest of truth. He dispassionately tried to search truth. This discussion often challenged many of an established belief and conventions, means the traditions were a bit challenged by these philosophers. Considering all these matters of concern to the citizen and the state, literature also came into consideration. These people started considering the value to society, the nature and the function of literature. The previous age, we can say, was one of creative activity, that is art and literature, but the 4th century BC, means when we come to the age of Plato, we can say that this age was an age of critical inquiry and analysis. Now let us see something about Plato. Plato was the most celebrated disciple of Socrates. He was not a professed critic of literature, because already we have seen that he is a philosopher. But while considering the matters of concern to the citizen and the state, these people considered literature also as a part of the matters. His critical observations, therefore, are not embodied in any one single work. His chief interest actually was philosophical investigation, and as a matter of philosophical investigation, literature also had come under consideration. The dialogues is in the form of questions and answers. Actually, these are questions that interested Plato, and these questions were answered by a number of interlocutors. The chief interlocutor among them was definitely Socrates. Now, here we have a list of Plato's works, means his dialogues. We shall name them now: Ion, Cratylus, Protagoras, Gorgias, Symposium, Republic, Phaedrus, Philebus, and Laws. Plato's utterances on literature in all his dialogues are not more than scattered references in a bigger context. Means the bigger context was philosophy, but while discussing the philosophy, the ways to bring the well-being of the citizen and the state, literature was also one of the matters of concern, and so such references are scattered in the bigger context. But though scattered, they cannot be marked as less. Their profundity, the depth of their thought makes them a very important contribution, and it is the first of its kind to the art of criticism that these people paid attention, and especially we see Plato discussing about these matters. Now, friends, let us take a look at Plato's view of art. So, while discussing about the matters, these people started discussing about literature. But before coming to literature, let us see what Plato has to say about art in general. Plato's thought of art in general is intimately bound up with what is called his theory of ideas. This theory of ideas becomes very, very important, dear friends. In the Republic, he says, ideas are the ultimate reality. Now, to understand this concept, let us take the example of a tree. The actual tree that we see, Plato says, is a copy. A copy of what? It is a copy, Plato says, of the original idea that we have in the mind. So, idea of everything is the original pattern of that particular thing. And when we come down to the thing itself is a copy of that idea. This is what is the concept of the theory of ideas. And as we all know, copy always falls short of the original, and so it is one times or once removed from reality. So, being a copy, the thing itself is one time away from reality as per Plato. Now, art reproduces things, means things are reproduced by the medium of art, and that too as mere pastime. So, just as a time pass, art is reproduced and it is reproducing things. So, literature also is an art like painting, sculpture, music, etc. So, literature reproduces in words, painting in colors, sculpture in stone, music in its notes. So, here is the concept then of the theory of ideas. Idea is the original pattern, thing is a copy of it, and so it is one times away from reality, and art, being a copy of a copy, is twice removed from reality. So, as per Plato, the production of art helped neither to mold the character of the citizen nor to promote the well being of the state. And these were the matters of concern that these philosophers were considering or discussing, the citizen and the state. These were the matters of concern for the philosophers, as we have seen in the earlier slide. Addition of charm to allure people, to attract people, is also not denied by Plato. On the other hand, he says the addition of beauty, the addition of charm becomes more dangerous to the individual and society. Potentialities for good are surely there in the art. It could inculcate a love for beauty, a love for whatever is noble in character and life. But the objection that Plato has is that all the artists do not pursue it in the right manner. It is not rightly pursued by all. And so he says that it becomes dangerous to the individual and the society. Now, let us take a look at Plato's attack on poetry. So, here he says or we can say that it is an attack that Plato has raised on poetry. Now, as we have already seen earlier, the main concern of all these philosophers and so of Plato are the two matters, that is, the good or well being of the individual and the good or well being of the state. These are the main concerns. Now, judging poetry by these two standards, what does Plato find? That there is more to condemn than to approve. Means there are more things which we can say are negative than there is anything positive in poetry. The first ground of condemnation, as we have already seen, that it is an art. Poetry is a part of literature. Literature itself is an art. So, indirectly we can say that poetry is an art, and so whatsoever are the faults in art that apply to poetry also. So, poetry is incapable of getting to the roots of the things. So, we can say that it is twice removed from reality as we apply the theory of ideas here. Now, following are the three other grounds of condemnation that Plato has done. First point now of condemnation that we see regarding poetry is poetic inspiration. Plato says, how is poetry created? The poet is inspired, or we say that he was guided chiefly by the impulse of the moment, or it is said that the muse suddenly fills him and makes him sing. Now, if poetry is in this way created, then it is nothing but a sudden outpouring of the soul and not a cool deliberation, not a long thought over matter, but a sudden outpouring of the soul. And so, here we see the objection that Plato has on poetry. Often, the poet's utterances contain a profound truth, but when does it appear? It appears only after it is subjected to further test of reason. Means after applying test of reason, we can understand that there is certainly a profound truth in the poetry, but after the test. So, poetry cannot be relied upon. It cannot take the place of philosophy. So, in the Republic, he says that we need to ban such poets in the ideal commonwealth as is envisaged by Plato in the Republic. He allowed only those poets who composed hymns to the gods and panegyrics on famous men. Such type of poetry was acceptable to Plato. Now, the second charge that we see against poetry is the emotional appeal of poetry, being a product of inspiration and as an art, means earlier two factors that we have seen, plus with beauty of form added. Poetry affects the emotions rather than reason and the heart rather than the intellect. So, this is his objection. This is his attack on poetry, that it appeals the emotions and not the reason. For example, tragic poetry of his age, because that was the data that he had at his perusal. So, in which weeping and wailing were indulged to the full to move the hearts of the spectators. Plato complains in the Republic that poetry fed and watered the passions instead of drying them up, and let them rule instead of ruling them as they ought to be ruled, with a view to the happiness and virtue of mankind, unquote. So here, this is the complaint that Plato has, that if this literature, if this poetry keeps on feeding and watering the passions, when will man be able to control them, rule them? Because they ought to be, they need to be ruled, not we to get ruled by the passions. If we want the happiness and virtue of mankind, we need to have a control on them. And the tragic poetry of the age of Plato was not of that type. That is what Plato felt. The third point that we see where Plato attacks on poetry is the non moral character of poetry. He says, in its treatment of life, poetry treats both virtue and vice alike. Alike means in the same manner. Sometimes virtue and sometimes vice triumph indifferently. So it is not paid attention towards whether virtue should win or whether vice should win. Indifferently, it is portrayed in the poetry. Plato says so. About the literature esteemed in his day, means the great epics of Homer, the narrative verse of Hesiod, the odes of Pindar, and the tragedies of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Plato says in the Republic, quote, they give us to understand that many evil livers are happy and many righteous men unhappy, and that wrongdoing, if it be undetected, is profitable, while honest stealing is beneficial to one's neighbor but damaging to one's self. Unquote. So here Plato shows what the problem he feels is through the non moral character of poetry, that many evil livers live happily, whereas the righteous men have to suffer. And the wrongdoing of these evil people, if it is undetected, it is profitable to such people. Whereas the honest people, the right people, they, whatsoever they do, is beneficial for their neighbors, not for themselves, because it damages to their self. But the neighbors, means the other persons, definitely get a benefit out of their honesty, out of their right and honest behavior. Further, he says that their portraits of gods, as they are portrayed unjust, revengeful, and even the portrayal of heroes who are shown with pride, anger, grief, this also is equally objectionable for Plato. Such literature, he says, corrupted both the citizen and the state. Further, we discuss about the function of poetry. Plato says that mere pleasure cannot be the object of poetry. He cannot conceive of art as divorced from morals. So, what does he want? That there should be morality in the poetry, not just for pleasure's sake, not just to gain pleasure, delight out of it, should poetry be written. So, he suggests truth as the test of poetry. So, to test poetry, we should apply truth, he says. What contribution it makes to the knowledge of virtue. Is it helping virtue to grow or not? That is what should be tested in the poetry. So, as per Plato, a poet is a good artist only insofar as he is a good teacher. So, the object or function of poetry that Plato wants is teaching. Some moral lesson should definitely be there in the poetry, then only that poet can be called as a good artist. quote here, we must look for artists who are able, out of the goodness of their own natures, to trace the nature of beauty and perfection. That so, our young men, like persons who live in a healthy place, may be perpetually influenced for good. Unquote. Plato says so in the Republic. So the artists should originally be good natured, and so they are able to trace the beauty and perfection of the things. And if all the while our young men read such type of poetry, they definitely will be influenced for good. So this is what is the intention of poetry as per Plato. Poetic truth must be the highest truth, ideal form of justice, goodness, beauty, and the like. Only then it could mold character and promote interests of the state. So, poetic truth must be the highest truth. It should be the ideal form of justice, goodness. Whatsoever can be good, whatsoever can be justifiable, that should be there in the poetic truth. Then only it can help molding the character of the citizen and promoting interests of the state. Now, let's move towards what Plato has to say about drama. Dramatic writing formed but a branch of poetry in his times. So, the representations of drama are as per poetry, as poetry also was one of the arts so twice removed from reality, and plus Plato has given three more points of condemnation. So, all of them equally apply to drama. So, here we see that drama also is as much removed from reality, as much as a product of inspiration, as much emotional in appeal, and as much unconcerned with morality as those of poetry. So, again to be condemned, again to be attacked on. He has added some more comments on drama apart from these 4 points that we have already discussed with the consideration of poetry. So, the first point further, its appeal to baser instincts. Unlike poetry, drama is meant to be staged, not just to be read. So, it depends upon the approval or disapproval of a heterogeneous multitude. Multitude, a mass of people watches such dramas. And so, in order to please them all, the dramatist often introduces what this multitude likes, what all these people like. So, some have a particular choice, the others have other choice, and to meet all these choices, the dramatist has to add lot many things which these variety of people, the heterogeneous multitude, will be appreciating, approving of, otherwise they will disapprove of it. So for their sake, the writers, the dramatists had to add certain things in their plays. Here Plato discusses them. Chorals and lamentations were added in tragedy. Imitation of thunder, cries of beasts were added in comedy. Now, such things, Plato says, arouse the baser instincts of the drama spectator. These are such things where these people will be ashamed of themselves in normal life, but while watching the drama, they just enjoy it. The next point of condemnation for drama that Plato has is effects of impersonation. Now, here he says sometimes drama reacts unfavorably on the actors themselves. The roles are played, the characters are played by these actors. So, while enacting them, these characters, these roles can react unfavorably on the actors themselves. First point he has said, impersonating evil characters like cowards, knaves, criminals. These evil qualities enter into their own nature. The actor himself can gain these evil qualities. Second point, impersonating the innocent sort of characters. With this, there can be a repressing of the individuality of the actor, and it may lead to the enfeeblement or weakening of the character of the actor. Third point he has said, impersonating the cream of humanity, such as men of courage, wisdom, and virtue, the actor surely stands to gain, because the same qualities are stimulated in him by the force of habit, means habitually performing those roles, the cream of humanity. The actor will definitely gain out of such things, but all the while or all the actors do not or cannot get such type of roles to enact. So those tragedies that represent the best and noblest in life are of positive benefit to the community, and so they deserve to be encouraged. Now the third point of drama, tragic and comic pleasure. Pleasure aroused by tragedy. Plato takes us to this point. He questions, what is it in a painful scene that causes pleasure? It is such a matter that Plato for the first time thought over it. This is the importance of Plato. He says that human nature is a mixture of heterogeneous feelings, anger, envy, grief, and so on. Painful by themselves, but afford pleasure when indulged in excess. Means when we get them in more than sufficient quantity, they lead us to pleasure. So these heterogeneous feelings, such as the negative qualities such as anger, envy, grief, they also, though painful by themselves, can definitely give pleasure. This is where Plato leads us. It pleases a man to lose his temper or weep. Otherwise, why would he do so? He would not do so. This is what Plato says, that even pleasure is aroused by tragedy, tragedy giving pleasure. The next point, pleasure aroused by comedy. Plato knew only of the satirical kind because only satires were available at the times of Plato. Pleasure takes the form of laughter at a coward behaving as a brave man, a fool behaving as a wise man, a cheat as an honest man, etc. Now, this pretension of a coward, like a brave man, and so on, creates laughter. Plato says such a pleasure is malicious because it arises from the weakness of a fellow man. Means we are talking about a weakness and laughing at it. So it is a kind of malicious, not good quality of pleasure, he says. And such a man, if is whom we love, then it surely can put us into good humor because we love him and on his weakness we are laughing. So there would be no problem in it. But if such a person is whom we hate, then that cannot be called as laughter. It is, on the other hand, contempt that is shown through that laughter, and so definitely it is malicious. So here Plato takes us to a profound truth that no character can be comic unless he is lovable. So if lovable, then that laughter can really be a pure laughter, but otherwise it is full of contempt, and so it is definitely malicious. Plato also warns us that too frequent indulgence in laughter affects seriousness of conduct. To do some great deeds, we need to be serious and not just keeping ourselves too frequently indulged in laughter and pleasure. Now, let us take a look at Plato's observations on style. Plato lived in an age of oratory. He was a philosopher. So, he laid down a few principles of good speech because oratory was on the rise in his times. In Phaedrus, he gives us a few principles which apply equally to good writing because these are principles of good speech, but they equally apply to good writing also. The first essential quality or need of a good speech is a thorough knowledge of the subject. Means one must be sure of what one has to say. So if he knows that, if he goes for a thorough understanding and knowledge of that subject, that can definitely make him a good speaker. The next thing, according to Plato, for the speaker, the good speaker is that one must know the art of speaking to impress the hearers. One needs a natural gift, a knowledge of its rules, and constant practice in the word. So, to be a good speaker, he should have a thorough knowledge of the subject and he should also be able to express himself in a proper manner. For that, he needs the art of speaking. And to gain this art of speaking, the three things that Plato says are needed: natural gift, plus a knowledge of its rules, and plus keeping himself in constant practice of it. The third thing that is important for a good speaker, means for a good writer also, is that thoughts upon his subject must follow each other in a natural sequence. All together, then they may form an organic whole. So, first must come at the first, middle must be at the middle, and end must be at the end. Means if middle is taken at first or first is placed at the end, it won't follow a natural sequence. And so whatsoever thing is created out of that cannot be called as an organic whole. And the last care with all these three things is that one should have a knowledge of human psychology, because the writer or the speaker needs to impress the people, impress the hearer, impress the person that reads his writings. So, to get into his hearer's heart and soul. So, he needs to have these 4 points. This is what Plato observes regarding style. The principles of the spoken and the written word are the same, and if these are followed, surely that person can gain success. Now, at the end, let us move towards the value of Plato's criticism. As we have already seen, Plato has discussed about poetry and drama, and through what he has said, we come to this knowledge that Plato thought poorly about these two things. But the way he has dealt or provided us information about literature overall and poetry and drama in specific, he shows himself a discerning critic in both. We definitely can say that he is a very deep critic regarding both the things, poetry and drama. His charges against poetry and drama show his insight into their nature, function, and method. Now, if we discuss about the nature of these two things, poetry and drama, we have seen that his insistence on truth as the test of poetic greatness shows his awareness of the difference between the truths of poetry and the truths of life. The poet states not what is, but what appears to him, and so it is twice removed from reality. This is the very nature of poetry, and this is it that militates against a dispassionate quest for truth. And dispassionate quest for truth was of prime concern for these philosophers. And if it takes us twice away from truth, surely that cannot be good for these philosophers, because their main concern was the citizen and the state, the individual and the society. So, talking about nature, he has given us the point that truth only can be the test of poetic greatness. Talking about function, his disapproval of the non-moral character, means where he has discussed about the non-moral character of the poetic art, there we get the function of poetry that is expected by Plato. His disapproval of the non-moral character of the poetic art implies the difference between the function of poetry and the function of philosophy. Being a philosopher, he is comparing it with philosophy. The one is aimed at delight, means poetry is aimed at delight, whereas the function of philosophy is instruction. And so these two do not match. Plato requires instruction as the function and not delight. Now, talking about the method, his attack on the emotional appeal of poetry indirectly shows the poetic method, and that is to persuade by pleasing, means the method, the way by which poetry persuades is by pleasing, to make one feel rather than think, means it leads to emotions, emotionally appealing the reader or the hearer. Other contributions of Plato we can see further, his observations on the sources of tragic and comic pleasure, means how do we get comic pleasure. On one hand we can understand, but even tragedy provides a kind of pleasure. This is what he discussed, and that too in depth. So that is his other contribution. His thoughtful analysis of the essentials of spoken and written speech are also his major contribution to literature, to art, to poetry. First, to see that all art is imitation or mimesis, imitating the objects of life or nature. There are two kinds of art: the fine arts like literature, painting, sculpture, and music. All these, he says, are fine arts. They are indulged in for mere pleasure, but they are created, they are used only to gain pleasure. Whereas the other type of arts he discusses are like medicine, agriculture, cookery. These are cooperating with nature. These are of more use, and so they are named as useful arts by Plato. Further, he has also given us a division of poetry into dithyrambic, mimetic, and mixed kind. Dithyrambic are the purely lyrical pattern, lyrics. The second one, purely mimetic or imitative. For example, drama. where it is a mime. People imitate life. Okay, life is imitated in the form of action and speech. And the third type is the mixed kind. For example, epic, in which the poet partly indulges in lyrical flights, means lyrics, the first type, dithyrambic, is also used, and partly he introduces action and speech, means like drama, where life is imitated. Now, Plato considers epic as superior to drama, and his consideration, this verdict that Plato has given for epic, is upheld by later generations also. Talking about the principles of art, we can say that they are same as the principles of style as per Plato. They are well thought out matter, means a proper thought should be given over the matter. Second thing is to learn its technique, a knowledge of its technique. The third thing required is constant practice in it. And next, unity of design, or the interweaving of the parts into an inseparable whole. Means the art should be created, the style of creating that art should be in such a manner that it cannot be separated. It forms whole, one whole thing. To interpret poetry aright, it is necessary to have a knowledge of poetry as a whole and of the principles of its composition. This is what is said in Ion by Plato. Scattered in fragments, but all together read like a systematic treatise on the art of writing. So, as we have already seen that all these things that Plato discusses about literature, Plato discusses about art or poetry or drama, all these things are scattered in fragments in his works. They are not all together enclosed in one single work. But when deduced from all such works, we can see that these all things can be read like a systematic treatise on the art of writing. Now let us revise what we have done. We have first seen Plato's age, then we went on to take a look at Plato's works, then we gave importance to what Plato has to say regarding art. In art, then we saw how he attacks on poetry with the help of the 3 points: poetic inspiration, emotional appeal of poetry, and the third one, non-moral character of poetry. Then further we dealt with the function of poetry. After that, we went on to drama, Plato's comments on drama. There again he posed 3 points: its appeal to baser instincts, second was effects of impersonation, third, tragic and comic pleasure. Later on, we came to Plato's observations on style, and at the end, we saw what is the value of Plato's criticism. To discuss all these things, the book that I have referred, the things I have taken from is An Introduction to English Criticism by B. Prasad, in which we have the first chapter, The Greek Masters, in which the subbit is Plato. This is a Macmillan India Limited creation or publication. Thanks for being there, for listening to the video, and to take a good understanding as I could make it about Plato. Thanks a lot.